Today on The John Ankerberg Show,
75% of the world's population will be in cities by 2020. Does the church have a strategy to reach the people in their big cities? If they don't, the Great Commission will never be finished.
We're not talking about rocket science here. We're talking about simple tools to reach the world for Christ. But it works.
We've gone into each city intensively for 30 days, working closely with the churches on the ground, a symphony of media. 30 days saying that God gives you the power to change. Call this number. Everyone that calls the number, they get a 100-page tailor-made book for that city containing the most powerful testimonies of how God changed lives.
75% of all the people living on Earth today live in one of the 500 megacities of the world. Consider the astonishing number of people living in just 8 of these cities. 38 million people live in Tokyo. 25 million live in Seoul. 13 million people live in Moscow. 8 million people live in New York. 4 million live in Los Angeles. 2 million live in Havana. 21 million people live in Mexico City. And 30 million live in Jakarta. Does the Christian church have a strategy for getting all of the people in any one of these megacities all talking about Jesus at the same time over a 30-day period of time? One man does. And today you will meet Hannu Hauka from Finland. His organization, Great Commission Ministries, has helped churches in 100 megacities of the world conduct evangelistic campaigns to get millions of people in their city talking about, thinking about, and asking questions about how Jesus can transform their lives. How does Hannu do it? Why is God greatly blessing his strategy? Today you will find out on this special edition of The John Ankerberg Show. Welcome to our program. I'm John Ankerberg. Thanks for joining me. I have a very special guest who has just flown in from Helsinki, Finland. And so he came right off the airplane and has had just a few minutes of sleep, and he is here with us, and then he's on his way to Cuba. Hannu Hauka is my guest. And you folks know that we're on in India, in Hindi, Telugu, Tamil, and now in English, right across the country. And as I've flown the last 3 years to India, one of the people that I've met is Hannu. Now, I've had Morgan Jackson and Troy Carl, they've been there. I met a pastor who just sent me a note, and for Easter, he had 300,000 people for his Easter service. On a regular basis, he has 180,000 people every Sunday coming to his church. Amazing people. It's a lot of fun to be in the back room talking with these special people that God has, and Hannu is another one of these special people that God uses in a tremendous way. And I wanted to do this program today because there is a very urgent need that we're going to talk about in a moment. But I want to introduce him to you first of all and tell you a little bit about him. Hannu speaks 3 languages fluently. He speaks Finnish, he speaks Russian, and he speaks English. And Hannu, you were born in Finland, you grew up in Canada, and then you did something that was very unusual. Tell me about that.
Yes, I was married in the atheistic superpower called the Soviet Union way back under Leonid Brezhnev when he was the leader of that country.
Yeah, so born in Finland, grew up in Canada, and you get married in the Soviet Union. I want to show the folks how working in the Soviet Union as a Christian, what you devised and what God did with you. And it was absolutely amazing. I want you folks, we're going to show you just a short clip. I want you to watch this clip, and it'll tell you what Hannu, how he first got into the ministry. Watch.
The roots of the ministry go back to the 1970s when a young Canadian, Hannu Hauka, married a Soviet Christian dissident named Laura, and they began work in shortwave radio ministry broadcasting the gospel in Russian back into the USSR from Finland. Although there was no way to broadcast television into the Soviet Union, Hannu and Laura still felt compelled to develop a Russian TV ministry. So they bought one videotape machine to create a translation of a Bible cartoon series into Russian. A miracle took place when Soviet state TV called them to request the program for broadcast across all 11 time zones of the USSR. As a result, over 1 million responses came in the mail from all over the Soviet Union. Many of today's church leaders in Russia credit this Bible cartoon series as their first exposure to the gospel.
Now, Hanu, you were surrounded by 1 million letters that you got from people in Russia by showing this program that you translated yourself. And, I mean, you had to be surprised. And I think the post office told you, instead of having just a post office box, you needed what?
We needed a post office, and they said, you take all these letters, and they were containers of letters. You take them all to your office, you sort them, and you just bring back the ones that don't belong to you. They were in panic mode in the Moscow postal office.
Mm-hmm. Now, God opened that door for you because Channel 1 actually came to you and asked if they could show this. Mm-hmm. You couldn't have done this in 100 years by yourself. No. God spurred those folks to come over and say, we want to show this, and they showed it right straight across Russia. And then those little dots that people saw, these were people that came to know the Lord and people that eventually went into the ministry in Russia.
Yes.
Now, off of that miraculous beginning, then God started to give you a strategy. You started thinking about how to reach the big cities across the world. How many big cities across the world, mega cities, do we have?
There are about 500 mega cities in the world today which have a population of 1 million people or over. And we've been able to reach 100 cities to date in the last 13 years.
Yeah. You've done 100 what we call mega city outreaches, which we're going to show them. And we're going to do a little clip here that will show you what a mega city outreach is, how they do it, and why God is using this in such a great way. So I want you to watch this clip right now, and this will explain a lot of things. Watch.
The eventual collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 opened more doors to take the gospel to Russia. Churches could now operate freely, and many new church congregations were born. But the greatest opportunity came at the dawn of the 21st century.
You know, in 2003, we came to a point where we started to ask ourselves serious questions, and we started to ask the churches on the ground in Russia, in the big cities, serious questions about how we were doing, how we were faring with the Great Commission. We said, if Jesus really meant what he said when he said, go ye into all the world and preach the gospel to all, to all peoples and all nations, how are we faring? How many are you reaching? How many visit your churches, and how many people come in contact with your ministries in the course of 1 year? Some of the churches says, well, we have maybe 10, 20, maybe 30, 40 non-Christians would visit our church services during the course of a year. Some churches says, well, maybe 100. Some of the dynamic churches would say, well, maybe 1,000 people. We asked the question, well, what about the 995,000 other people who never come in touch with the church? Did Jesus not mean them as well? And so the churches and the pastors will say, yeah, we have a problem here. Where we said, okay, let's get together, let's pray. Let's devise a strategy to reach the 1 million residents of this city over a course of 30 days, effectively, so that they will know what Jesus Christ, what God's Son, Jesus Christ, is offering them. That's how this whole thing started. We utilized all the media for 30 days. That is primetime television, secular TV, radio, billboards, mega screens, outside mega screens, public transport system, the outside of buses, newspapers, flyers into homes, everything we could get our hands on. We did it for 30 days to impact the city. It was saturation. All the advertising that takes place over the course of 30 days has a call-in number. So we direct all the traffic to a call center, and we receive tens of thousands of telephone calls, tens of thousands of families that are struggling with problems that are very real, breakup of the family, 4 million children on the streets, meaning 4 million homes at least, according to official statistics, that are just broken, where the children are not even at home, and we think the real figure is probably double, if not triple that. There's a huge problem in Russia. 40% of the male population struggling with alcohol. And God comes into this picture saying, I will give you the power to change through my Son, Jesus Christ. This book, God Gives You the Power to Change, it's been printed in up to about 10 languages now, but the main language, of course, is Russian. We'll have over 1 million books in print and distributed by the time, many of the people see this program.
Following the end of a megacity media saturation evangelism campaign, the churches on the ground go into high gear with follow-up. It's a time when thousands of people are led to Christ through one-on-one visitation.
Now, how many cities did you go to in Russia?
We reached a total of 40 of the biggest cities in Russia, actually, reaching 70 million people through these megacity media saturation campaigns together with the churches on the ground.
And you used a lot more than just 1 million books. How many did you eventually use in Russia?
We ended printing 5 million copies of this book for distribution.
What's in the book?
The book has, it showcases dynamic transformation stories of how Jesus Christ has changed the lives of people. You have star power, as they say in America, in some of those stories. Then you have just the regular people that have been alcoholics or drug addicts, and they have come to faith in Christ and have been liberated, freed from their addictions. And then you also have the 4 spiritual laws, which is a very clear ABC on the first steps to new life in Jesus Christ.
All right. Now, in history, the pendulum swung open. I can remember the first time I heard that the Soviet Union was opening and they were asking for 500,000 Bibles, and I said, that's a lie. I don't think that's even true. But it was true. God opened the door, and all of a sudden Russia was open. And you took advantage of that. You did all of these megacities campaigns inside of Russia. But then as history goes on, leaders change, politics change, and the pendulum has swung the other way. And now Russia is considered what?
Well, Russia today changed dramatically last year in July when President Putin signed a new law severely restricting the missions activity of the churches on the ground across the nation. And so now we have received a desperate plea from the churches saying, please give us more of these evangelistic tools. They want 1 million new books as soon as possible, because we know that the doors are closing in Russia, and we have a limited window of opportunity to deliver what they have begged us for, so that they can continue to do what they need to do to reach their nation for Jesus.
Yeah, the truth is that in one of your megacity campaigns, you had 2,000 churches that actually worked with you, and out of that, you formed God formed 1,600 new churches, and those 1,600 new churches are the ones that are requesting 1 million more booklets, because even under the pressure that they're in, they want to share this information with their friends, because this is how they got saved. All right?
Exactly, yeah.
And the fact is, you've got to do this, you've got a way of doing this in printing in Russia itself. Tell us about that for quickly.
Yes, what we're doing is, when we printed the 5 million books, we used what they call the Soviet Siberia printing house. It was a publishing house in Novosibirsk, smack in the middle of Siberia, which was responsible for printing all the atheistic material under the Soviet Union. And now they are printing, millions of copies of these Christian books. And it's something that, only God could do. He has to have a sense of humor. Just that particular publishing house is doing this, but it's doing it only for a limited period of time. We don't believe that it's going to last for very long.
Yeah, and when the door started to close on Russia, then you got the idea from God, maybe we could do this in other cities outside of. And of all spots, you picked a place filled with Hindus and Muslims. You went to Bangalore city in India, and folks, I want you to see this clip of what happened when they took this evangelistic outreach to Bangalore. Watch this clip.
Bangalore has 10 million people, each carrying some sort of pain and burden. My heart aches for each of them. I want to reach them all, but I feel inadequate. I feel compassion for the lost, but I am afraid to love. I know the pain of the addict, but I feel incapable. I see the suffering of the suicidal, but I don't know what to do. If only there was somewhere we could all get together and do something, anything, together, as one body. Is it even possible?
Bangalore's time has come. Our city will be under siege by the Holy Spirit. This is our chance to see the city experience the power of God's love.
The stage was set and the Power to Change Bangalore campaign kicked off as planned in the month of November, right until the middle of December. Testimonies were selected according to theme and by pastoral references, after which high-quality videos were produced at Yes, India. Men and women from across various churches in Bangalore stepped up to share their personal stories of faith. The vibrant blue and yellow Power to Change signature was evenly distributed along the 740 square kilometer range of this buzzing metro, immediately grabbing the attention of passerbys who didn't think twice about calling in for their copy of the Power to Change book. The Power to Change media distribution, from newspapers to magazines and TV programs to Facebook, offered Bangaloreans more than just a complimentary book. It offered them hope and a chance of experiencing the true power of change. There's no doubt that the backbone of Power to Change was the 1,400-odd call center volunteers that made up the call center of Power to Change. Volunteers were provided with adequate training to take calls coming in. Both working and non-working individuals came forward to serve selflessly.
As soon as we heard about this campaign, which was in October 6th, we were really excited about it, and we were full on into it because a lot of years of prayer for the city has gone behind this excitement.
There have also been people who've been calling and wondering what is this all about. And we keep talking about transformation. Like my testimony says, I was an addict and I've been transformed to what I am today.
Power to Change Bangalore also saw the involvement of 788 churches across the Garden City. Pastors of churches, small and large, partnered with Power to Change.
I think the gospel is going out to so many people who cannot be otherwise reached through the media plan.
The campaign itself is an amazing strategy to impact the city, to reach lives that otherwise would not be reached.
The beautiful thing about this campaign is that this campaign does not belong to any organization. It has just two agendas. One, the superstar is Jesus Christ, and the second is that the local churches will grow.
Never in the history of the city, or for that matter any other city, that we hear of such a campaign that completely for 30 days brings the message of the gospel and the saving grace of Jesus Christ so powerfully through 15 testimonies and 15 stories of people whose lives have been transformed.
And the campaign is just not about the media. It's not about going and giving the book. Yeah, that's part of the campaign. But the real work starts after the book is given to the caller. And I think if every church which partners in Power to Change sees that scope to go and reach out to that caller, because the caller there needs help. The caller there has a need, and the caller there doesn't know about Jesus. And that's the heart of the campaign.
All in all, the Power to Change Bangalore campaign has impacted the city, causing reflection on life and certainly on God.
Hannah, we're just giving a glimpse of what you are doing in these mega city campaigns. It's really amazing. What were the results of Bangalore City in India?
Well, in Bangalore City, India, we actually received 257,000 telephone calls in just roughly over a month of time. We had 780 churches involved in that campaign. We saw thousands of people that came into the churches as a result. The big deal was that in a city of almost 10 million people, in 30 days, you were able to go out into that city and basically blanket that whole city, which the churches are not able to do conventionally. And now they came together, and for 30 days they did what they thought would not be possible, to reach a city of 10 million people.
Yeah, and every one of those phone calls that came in meant that people were requesting a book, and you had the church members in those churches take a booklet and visit those people. Yes. And then they would have a chance to witness to them, to lead them to the Lord, or then they would call and say, how did you like the book when you read it? And Correct. The book was these testimonies of people in their city, in their culture, talking about how Christ had transformed them. Now, you've also, after, how many of these campaigns have you done?
We've already done 100 plus cities.
Mega City Crusades.
Yes.
All right, and you just recently went to Cuba, and you had one in Havana, but it encompassed the whole country. How many people were in Havana?
Havana has a population of just over 2 million people, and we had almost 400 churches involved in Havana, and they reached out to their city in about 45 days. We had over 100,000 people contacted one-on-one on the streets of Havana because of the volunteers from the churches. 60,000 people requested the book that could change their lives, the 8 stories in this case that could change their lives forever. And at last count, when I talked to one of the bishops of a big denomination, he said, according to our count, we already have 16,000 new people in our churches. And that was about a month ago.
16,000, and you're leaving here and you're going right down to Cuba now to check up. And the follow-up goes on for 1, 2 years, 3 years some, because it's a series of phone calls that you have with the people checking up. They visit them, they give them the booklet, they read the booklet, then they check up by calling them, how'd you like the booklet? And oh, by the way, we've got a gift for you, and you send them a DVD, and again, you have a visit, and the DVD is actually the Jesus film, and then after they've seen the Jesus film, you call them again. So there's many opportunities for the people to accept Christ. But what I like is you're not having a big stadium where you're asking the people to come to the stadium to hear one guy like Billy Graham, but you are actually putting up on everything that's moving in that city a poster where they can call in. And actually, when they call in, the book is brought to them. So they can stay in their homes and it's brought to them. I love this idea. And you do it in their culture and their language. And how many booklets do we need for Cuba? Because you have a desperate need there.
Well, the churches, they received 150,000 books. That was the key tool for leading all these people to a living faith in Jesus and just to be able to reach out to the city. Now they want another 150,000 books. They said 500,000, but I said, well, let's take another 150,000 first. There are logistical problems also involved. But 150,000 is urgently needed today in Cuba.
Yeah, now we're going to try to raise some money for these books, the ones in Russia immediately, and for Cuba immediately. But can you imagine that God is doing this in Cuba? Now, folks, I've got to tell you that when I've been in India, and I've been talking with Hannah, what we eat there, and we meet in America, for 3 years, I've told you that there's been somebody that wanted me to come on in Finland in television in prime time. This is the guy. And so now we've just started, but why did you want the John Ankerberg show for Finland, for Sweden, for Denmark, for Norway?
Well, first of all of Europe, not to mention Northern Europe, is a very post-Christian, very secular, humanistic society. Northern Europe, Scandinavia, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Denmark are even more so. 80% of the people in most of our countries, they don't even believe that there is a God. And we know that the John Ankerberg show addresses this very issue. If you have doubts about whether God exists or not, then this is the program that you need to watch. And so we want to have maximum exposure for the John Ankerberg show in all of our Scandinavian countries. And I know that our nations are dying spiritually unless we can somehow inject a vibrant faith back into their hearts.
Now, folks, 9 weeks ago, I wanted you to hear my first interview with Hanu Hauka about the churches in Russia and Cuba, because I felt the need was urgent and the time was short. Well, yesterday I asked Hanu for an update on what is happening in Russia, and the news is not good. He told me that the Russian government has cracked down on churches with new laws and restrictive regulations that have been added to a law that was signed by President Putin last year. To enforce these new laws, the government is forcing all evangelical churches to re-register their charter with the government to show that they are complying. What are the new laws? The government now states any Christian church with 50 members or more is to be designated as a potential terrorist target. And as such, they must hire government security agents to be on site and attend every church service. And they're requiring that every church add expensive metal detectors to the entrances of their church. But there's no way the churches can afford to pay for these expensive security measures. This is simply the government's way to crush the churches financially. What happens if a church can't afford to comply? Well, then the law says only 50 people can attend their church. And some pastors are trying desperate measures to get around this law by removing all but 50 people from their membership rolls. For example, churches with 400 members are removing 350 of them from their rolls. But the Christians whose names are removed are greatly offended and wonder what will happen to them. Will they be forced to gather someplace else in groups of 50 or less? Will they be able to attend their own church as visitors? No one knows right now. In addition, the Russian government is requiring anyone who leads in the church, such as Sunday school teachers or youth pastors, to go through government training programs and receive diplomas in order to continue teaching. But the government has their own curriculum and will tell these Christians what they can and cannot teach. If they don't do what the government says, they will not be allowed to teach in their own church. Providentially, while the Russian government has restricted the church in almost every other area, printing presses are still accessible. In past years when Hanu conducted megacity campaigns in Russia, now these 1,600 churches in Russia are pleading with Hanu for 1 million more Power to Change books before the doors in Russia close for good. Today you also heard how 16,000 people accepted Christ as their Savior in Cuba. Pastors have met one-on-one with over 100,000 people seeking Christ, and 55,600 of those people are in follow-up programs right now. But they urgently need 150,000 more Power to Change books. And if you'd like to help provide these books for people in either Russia or Cuba, there are 5 ways that you can provide the needed books and help our ministry's outreach. First, if you'll give a gift of $30, your gift will provide 45 books for either Russia or Cuba. Second, if you'll give a gift of $100, you can provide 150 books. For a gift of $500, you can provide 750 books. For a gift of $1,000, you can provide 1,500 books. For a gift of $5,000, you can provide 7,500 books. And if you're able, a gift of $50,000 will provide 75,000 books. Folks, these Christians need our help now. And if you'll help, please call us at 1-800-805-3030. That's 1-800-805-3030. You may call that same number any day this week, 24 hours a day. Or you may go to our website at jashow.org, where we have a secure place for you to give your gift. And I'll appreciate your help very much.